I'm not really sure. Yeah, I honestly don't sure. Y'all, did you all do the Save Abraham Lincoln discussion question? Uh, all right. Anyway, so I've got this form container, and you can see it looks pretty familiar. It's got just one very basic form. It's got an onSubmit tied to the form itself, and an onChange tied to the input. I've got my name here. It's called a phrase. Got some styling. I do the inline styling. It's kind of nice to see it all at one spot, and it's not too much, so it won't take up too much space. And I've got two things. I've got a handle submit and handle change. They're just console logging. So at the moment, although I am able to register whatever I type here, this is not actually controlled. Do y'all know why we want to control our forms and what the benefit of that is, and why this works anyway, and why we don't want to do this?
Because users are crazy.
Yeah, users be crazy. No. Any guesses?
I would assume that the reason you want to control the form isn't so that there aren't like a bajillion requests being made, but really you just want to make like a few requests.
That's interesting. Well, no. I mean, I could actually, like in this case, I have a submit. So if I press enter, it'll register a submit only when I hit enter. And so this is really like if I was submitting a form to a database, that's the only time it's ever going to make that request, when I hit enter. And I can still capture. I can capture the value of the form when I hit submit, but it's still uncontrolled. And the reality is that this will work. I could write a fetch request right here, just like an original JavaScript, and send off that data.
I've just realized I don't even really know what you mean by control.
Yeah, that's
Oh, sure.
I think everybody might be.
Yeah, of course. So if I wanted to write in this case, if I wanted to write this and make this a controlled form in this particular component, all I have to do is something like this: state equals. I want to give it some kind of like. So like I might give it like a value and state phrase for this case. This is the shorthand version of constructor. And if I actually hook this up and I say the value of my input is just pointing to this.state.phrase, it's going to show whatever ends up being state here. So in this case, it's going to start off blank. If I wanted to control it, then it's sort of a two-way path. I need to actually be giving it the value, and I also, on change, need to be setting the state to be whatever the current value is. So if I go ahead and say this.setState, and I'll say phrase is equal to event.target.value. So now whenever I type something, it's going to trigger this event, set the phrase, cause a re-render, and pass that new data back down to my input. So on the user side, they really don't see any difference. Huh?
Does it just run less events and stuff? Like, doesn't like
If it's not controlled, or if it is controlled?
if it's controlled, it runs less.
Actually, no. I mean, in reality, this is causing a re-render every single time I type a key. So it's actually doing more work when it's controlled, as opposed to just console. Like if I just wanted to record this, if I didn't want to have the value here. Oh. This is no longer controlled. I can still type stuff in here. It's just not being stored in my state anymore.
So that, like, the more important part of the 2A is like being able to capture in state so that you can affect other parts of your app based on user input.
That's really the key, yeah. I mean, you could, in theory, like if you've done any forms in JavaScript, you could do something where you capture the value and you like fire up and pass and set that value up to state in like the old sort of JavaScript way. But the benefit of React is that since we have this controlled form, we have this controlled state, it makes it really fast and really easy to be like, this is my form, and the moment you type something, it will affect your entire app. So it might do a filter like you saw earlier. The moment you press a key, it knows, well, I'm going to re-render everything that requires that has that state in it. So it allows you to sort of in a more React-y way, communicate with your components. There's other things too. One big thing about it is that in this case, I'm going to put my value back in. right now I start with a blank form, and this is controlled. And I can know it's controlled because I can actually, I'm going to go ahead and put a console log in my render. Just do this.state.phrase. So that way, if I type this, I'll see it. So my state's in there. What if I wanted this form to start with a value, though, by default? Say I wanted to get something from my server and set this form to have information in it already. What's great about the control form is that I could actually get my value from my state, my server, and just set it to state, and it will automatically trickle down into my form. So if I want to default value this to be like butter, now every time I refresh my page, butter is the default. Hey, wait. Oh, yeah. Phrase. Butter. So you can actually sort of manipulate forms and feed it data, either from externally, from like a server, if you wanted to load up something like you wanted to edit someone's document that you got from your backend, or if you, for instance, if I wanted, and the goal actually right now is like, if I actually had existing stuff and I wanted to edit one of these with state, with a controlled form, it's not hooked up, but in theory, I should be able to click on one of these, tell it, this is my new form data, and it would populate the form for me automatically. Instead of having to do some kind of like DOM manipulation where I have to go find it and do extra like JavaScript-y stuff, it's a very smooth solution for React. So we're going to do that right now. But yeah, essentially, controlled forms allow you to really have some kind of more control over what's going in and out of that form. I can also do validation. So like, for instance, if I wanted to say, let's say I wanted to not, if I put a letter A in here, like let's say, let new value equal event.target.value, and then let's, what do I do? Dot, how do I do this? You could say something like actually like this. Yes, yeah. So like, you can say if event.target.value dot includes A, the new value equals butter. Else, the value equals new target value. So then I set this to new value. I'm actually going to clean this up a little bit. I want to put this out the outside, otherwise. Oh no! I'm going to get it.
You need a parens at the end of 15.
Yep. Thank you. So like, hey, if my form has something in it that I don't want, I'm gonna make it do something else. Now, butter's fine, but if I type A, it goes right to butter. Beef, butter. Bread, but I couldn't even write bread. I had to get the butter first, right? So it allows you, control forms allow you to validate things in a cleaner way. Before you even set anything, you can just say, I want to check this and do something to it. You can also, like, in this case, you could also prevent certain keys. If you wanted to say, I don't want to even register certain keys, you can stop it from registering, for instance. But it also, again, allows you to input data from external sources or from other parts of your app. Okay, cool. So we've got this controlled form. I'm going to undo this a little bit. Thank you. Make sure this works. Great. So now we have this controlled form, but when I press enter, it's still just console logging. It's not actually doing anything here. And the goal of this app would be, actually I'll go back to the top. I have this app. It just has two components in it. It has my form container that we've been looking at, and it has like a list container of phrases. This would be pretty familiar. You've seen a lot of these. This is going to take in whatever my state has, which in this case just has phrases. I have some example ones here, and it also takes in a function which is just going to, in this case, log a phrase still, so we'll just make sure this works. This way, actually, if I click on any of these, it's logging that thing I click on, right? So I want to be able to get this form data that I'm getting here, pass it up to my app, and then pass it down when I submit to a new list item. So basically create a new thing in my list of phrases, which will render down into different blocks. How do I do that? Currently my form is controlled inside of my form container up here. What do you think I should do in terms of hooking this up?
You want to, if you go back to app real quick, you want to pass that handle selection function.
This is really more for this side of things. When I click on these, I'm talking about like when I type something here and I press enter, I want it to show up as a new, to create a button.
Got you. So let's go back to the code.
Mhm.
So basically, at a macro level, whenever you hit enter or you submit,
Yeah.
to create a new element in the phrase list.
Yes, exactly. But right now, the values in my form are in my form container, and the values of my phrase list are in my app.
Got you. So another macro way of putting it is whenever you press enter, you want to add that phrase to the phrase list in the state of its parent.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Any suggestions of what I should do?
Did we do it earlier using some function?
Yeah, and we actually have the functions here. It's just not fully written out. But yeah, like we have something like handle submit, and so remember props always go down. But if you're trying to set something like above, you have to be passing it through a function, which is like a prop. So for instance, I could do something like this. I could take handle submit, cut it out of my form container, go up to my app container, and stick it in here. Then go ahead and pass down handle submit to be this dot handle submit. In my form container, this now becomes a prop, right? So I have to now say stop props. But now this is being passed down from the parent. So if this is working, I should be able to still say something. It's going to have a weird issue, which we'll see in a second. Oh, it's working. Cool. Butter AF. So submit's working, and it's working at the app level right now. So every time I hit this, it's actually the function being passed down as props. It's firing back at the app level, and it's bound to that level. That's why we use this, and that allows us to have this event fire from the child. So we're not quite there yet. We still have this event here, but this event is actually capturing the input. We want to capture the full form data. So at the moment, if you look at this, on change, on submit, I'm just taking the entire form. Actually, it kind of works, but I want to explain that. This is still here, this state. This is controlled here, and you can keep it here. The main thing is, though, that you kind of have to, I need to move this somehow into this list, right? If I wanted to add butter here, how can I do that through my handle submit?
And the event doesn't have the value of the input.
It does, but
it's not ideal.
It's not ideal because the thing is, like, if I, for instance, had, actually, no, it's not ideal because of this. Right now, I'm actually getting the value from a child node, which is not really that clean. If I said event.target.value, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have an issue because now if I try to submit this, it's undefined.
Can you pass in the other class?
The form container?
In the form container class, is it possible to rewrite the handle submit function to take in an argument of the state?
Yeah, so one solution, and that's a great solution, you can do something like this. You can write like a function at this level that's like, hey, on submit, I do want to still event because I need to event prevent default. But then I could say something like, since I have this prop, handle submit, I can, instead of pointing on submit directly to this prop, I can say this dot on submit, which will fire this function where I can then call my prop. And from here, I can pass this whatever I want. I don't have to pass in an event. I can say, pass it this dot state dot phrase. Now, when I click on this, it's going to fire to this function and say, okay, take in whatever state phrase is and pass it up to this. This is no longer event. This is really like a phrase. I've already done this downstairs. And now, if I go ahead and say phrase, this should work. Oh, it didn't quite work because my event is not working properly. Why is it not working properly?
It has on submit preserved.
No, actually it's not. I think I just had a messed up typo. But yeah, you're right. It's probably better to like do some other thing here on form submit, just because it is a little bit, because on submit is actually an event here. So now it's being passed up, right?
But you're still maintaining this state
In the
here.
yeah.
Kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, it's there are benefits sometimes. Like say I had a really complex form, you could have a state in your form that's like form data, and say the name is Joe, and you know his favorite colors. You can have a whole bunch of stuff here and control it in the form, and then when you're ready, just fire the entire state up, which is kind of a nice way to do it. It means that if you had a really complex form and I wanted to, like, I could control it up here, but it just means that this state becomes kind of way bigger and bulkier. So there's benefits to both. In this case, our form is pretty simple, so I am actually going to go ahead and just cut this state out. I don't really need it at this level. What I'm going to do instead is I might say something like, let's call it phrase again. So these are my old phrases. This is my new phrase. Currently, we'll say it's bread. Now I have state up here as bread. If I go ahead and pass this down as phrase, now I'm passing down this prop, which is this.
You're missing an R in
Phrase. Now it's available as a prop. So if I want to actually change this up, it's no longer a state here. It's simply props dot phrase. This I also need to move up now too, right? Because now it's not gonna set state at this level. I need to go back up, stick it into here, and this will actually work perfectly. It's exactly the same structure. So now when I change something, I should, if everything's working properly. Nope, it's not.
Kind of pass the function down.
Thank you. And what else is it's not? It's upset with form container. I was logging my phrase, which is no longer existent. So what I'll do actually is I'll just make sure that it's working by doing props.phrase. And cool. Not working yet. What's happening? Props dot handle change, props dot phrase, controlled form. Yeah. So every time the way it's working now that my state's all on the top, I render my page. It gets this data, this default data, passes it down to my form container in this prop. It sets my form value to that prop, and on change, it fires this function that's also being passed down, which will set my state back up here and sort of create this loop. It's the same loop we had before, but it's actually just one level removed. Now it's at parent and child instead of all in one child. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right, cool. All right. Awesome. So, great, this is working. If I hit submit, it should log this. This is kind of weird now too. Do I need this the way it's structured now? Yeah, what's the problem here?
Well, now that we've removed the state from form container, we no longer need to keep it the structure. We could still just do it with the way it was a step before.
Yeah.
And have it do it with the event.
Yeah, exactly. So we can actually cut this code out, make this a little cleaner. So this basically just contains my form. It's nice and presentational. I can go back in and handle submit. I'll still want to pass it down as a prop so that in my form, I want to fire it on submit. I'm going to change this down, again, back to props.handle submit. And here at handle submit, I'm not really taking anything in the same way anymore. I do need to take an event again because otherwise it will refresh. But now phrase, what should phrase be instead of just this variable that I was originally passing from the child? Exactly. I have everything at this level. So if everything's working, submit red. Cool. And if I wanted to make sure this is working, again, it's always good to test every step you go. It's great to just go ahead and say, is that what I think it's doing? Is that doing what I think it's doing? This.state. So now I should be able to see, cool, I have my 3 phrases in my bread. If I type butter, I should have now, oh, it didn't refresh. Huh. Why is it not refreshing? Oh, well, yeah, because I'm not actually adding anything. So what I have to do now for handle submit, to get it to add to phrases. Yeah, set state. In this case, I already have a bunch of phrases in here. So y'all remember what Rishi was talking about in terms of previous state and the functional version of set state? So you can do something like this, phrases is equal to this.state. Or I can maybe I'll say it like this. New phrase is equal to this.state.phrase. So this will set phrases to new phrase, but what's going to happen? Red, yeah. It's going to get rid of everything. So this is when you can do the splat. I could say something like this.state.phrase, phrases, new phrase, which will extract out all my previous things in that array and add this one thing. This will work. This is not the right way to do it, though. What's wrong? Would anyone talk about why this is not a good idea? Why don't you want to have a state call inside of your set state? It's okay. Yeah, I guess.
Kind of like self-referential, we get kind of recursive, right?
Yeah.
Setting something.
Like, technically it works, and in this case it works fine because we're just doing this one thing. The problem is that, and this is something Dan Abramoff talks about, it's like this.state, this is an asynchronous call. Set state is asynchronous, so it's not always guaranteed to fire immediately. And if you have a big app where a bunch of stuff is happening and modifying your state, there's a chance that your state's not what you think it is at this stage. You don't really know. There might be, say you had like a WebSocket where people were adding different messages. Your state might not be the actual version that you're talking about in this controlled form, in this set state. So the way to solve that is to use the functional version of set state, where you take in the previous state, which is guaranteed to be the previous version, and instead of this.state, you just say previous state phrases. So whatever it was at this time of calling set state, take the phrases, add the new phrase. That way there's no sort of interference from other versions of state. So this should now, I'm trying to show my friends. Don't do this. Oh, yeah, I'm missing one thing. The one big thing about the functional version of set state is that you actually, in the original version, you're passing in an object with keys, in this case. In this version, you're actually returning an object with keys. So you have to pull all of this inside of another object, or inside of brackets, and say return. And there we go. So you're like, I actually have to spell out, I'm returning this, and it will know to set this in my state. I don't know if y'all are fans of ES6. I'm a huge fan of it, and I actually like, whenever I see this kind of thing, I can replace it with parentheses, because parentheses implicitly return. So if I wrap an object with parentheses, I'm returning that object entirely. So this is the same thing, and this will work.
Do you have to refer to previous state instead of state?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I must have gone back too far. All right, yes. Cool. And cool. Any questions about how this is working so far? No? All right, cool. All right, so we've got this this thing here. I can see I can click on these and it's working. It sees what I want. So my submission is working now. I have a controlled form. It's talking from the child to the app and then passing down that new value to my list and rendering out my list. So this is two separate components talking to each other. Now, what if I wanted to edit one of these? Does anyone have any suggestions? Right now I'm registering it whenever I click it. So if I go to my phrase list container, I'm passing down this .state, which has my phrases. I'm passing down this function handle selection. So that's whenever I click it, it's firing this. And if I go to my phrase list container, it's pretty straightforward. I've got just a simple div with some styling, and it renders phrase list, which is this up here. So every render, it takes all the phrases in from my props, maps over them, and for each phrase, it makes a new component. My phrase component passes in a key, which is just the index in this case, passes in the actual value, and that function as well. So each of these cards, every time I add a card, it actually passes those things down into each card. If I go to my phrase, very simply, there's a lot of extra styling in here too, but then there's also an on-click here, which is firing my prop handle selection and passing back that phrase. So right now, this is 2 layers down, but when I click on it, it's firing at my app level and at that handle selection function here is firing and logging whatever I say. So just to prove that, yep. So if I wanted to click on this, let's say I click on a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, and I want this to show up in my form. I'm currently capturing the phrase here whenever I click on any card, and I have my controlled form phrase right here. How might I hook these two up?
Is that set state?
Yeah. So now, let's just start off with an empty phrase. Nothing's in here. I can say grilled cheese is the best. If I submit it, grilled cheese is the best. But if I wanted to go ahead and edit something else, I'm going to go look at this one. Now I can go ahead and say, oh, well, actually, I want to just say lost items. Well, that's a slight issue, but sort of working. So we're almost there. I actually want this one to change and not add a new one. So, any guesses about how I might be able to do this?
Does it have to do with keys?
Keys actually, yeah, you could capture like an ID, and that would work. In this case, my keys are kind of random because, but actually that might not matter. If I, for instance, said, let me just console log my phrase container is where I have my keys. I'm going to pass down something. I'm going to pass down ID and make it, or phrase ID. Pass down I. I think this is a good approach. So every time a phrase is generated, it's going to get an ID based on the position of it is in the list. Pass that down to the phrase. The phrase can store that, and I can actually, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and say like something like, I have to make sure to add it in here. Phrase ID. Phrase ID. Now, in my handle selection, I've got a phrase ID. So I just want to put a debugger here. I want to make sure this is working. Oh, I got to make sure to wrap this up. So now if I click on one of these, this should have ID of 0. This should be 1, 2. So if I click on this, oh, I hit the console, but there it is. There's my ID. There's my phrase. Yeah, so what I could do in this case is something like, I can set the phrase to whatever that is. I could set my phrase ID to whatever phrase, oh, that's not the right one. Set my phrase ID to whatever I passed it, which means I have to add something here. Phrase ID. I'll set it to null initially. Now, I have this phrase ID null. If I click on one of these, now phrase ID is 2. Now phrase ID is 1. Cool. So I can pull it into the form. I know the ID. But when I submit, it's still creating a new thing, which is an issue here. So in this case, I'm iterating through, I have a previous state function here. I'm iterating through all my phrases and adding a new phrase, which is the problem. Every time I submit, I'm just adding a new phrase and not editing the existing stuff. What could I do to replace this to make it sort of merge my edited values?
Just spread operator.
Spread operator would work if you had an object. If you were like looking to reset a certain key value, you totally could do a spread operator here. In this case, it's not really going to work. There's a couple of solutions. I think my favorite solution is just simply saying something like previous state dot phrases dot map. So for every phrase that's already existing, if phrase, actually, and also since I'm only working with an array, I need to also keep track of where I am in the array. So if I'm mapping through it, the first one's 0, I, then 1, 2. So if I is equal to phrase ID, then I'm going to return my new phrase. Else, return regular phrase, the original phrase. So basically, it's going to iterate through my whole array. If it finds the one that matches, it's going to replace that one. Otherwise, it's going to keep going and keep returning the originals. So now, this should allow me to, it does not like phrase ID. This.state.phrase ID. Or actually, previous state.phrase ID. Now I can edit whatever I want. Now, it's still a weird issue. I had to clean up my code a little bit because now what's going to happen when I press enter? Yeah, because it still thinks I'm still selecting that phrase. So this is something that's just like a more of a cleanup thing where I might say, I'm going to set that, and then I'm also going to go ahead and say phrase ID is null. That way I don't have to worry about editing twice. So if I go ahead and click this and I edit it, that's fine. But I try to edit again, and it won't work. So there's still some cleaning up to do, but it's just basic editing of forms. Any questions about that? Yes.
So, and maybe you had on this part, but so now you can't re-edit the same thing, but you have no way to go back to create new things.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah, you're right. That's a good. Yeah, that's a good point. So, yeah, how would I fix that?
Well, maybe on Word.
Well, I could simply say like since my phrase ID is either the one I selected or it's null. You could do something like this, where it's just like if. This is a little ugly, but if phrase ID. So if there's an ID at all, then go ahead and set this. And I'll go ahead and put the curlies in there. Else, this is pretty, there are better ways to do this, but this will get it done for now. Otherwise, just do the original we had. So that's going to be previous state phrases and new phrase. So if there's a phrase ID, go ahead and process this. Otherwise, just add the new one. No, it doesn't like phrase ID on line 23. 23. Oh yeah, of course. It's that state. Cool. Oh no. I broke it again. What did I do wrong? If I hit that, I should have phrase ID of 1. Oh, it's working now. Okay, it worked.
because
Just
zero is false.
that's interesting. I think you're right. I go here.
Because it worked on the left side, it doesn't work on the first one.
That's really cool. Yeah. Since this is zero is
We
false,
do
yeah.
this one,
So you
Which
can
is
just change
another
that.
disgusting
So
solution.
you can just change that conditional to be like is greater than 0.
Oh, sure.
Or is like
Or-
greater than equal to 0.
Wait, what were you saying?
If it's greater than or equal to 0.
0. Sure. Yep. Wait a second. Nope.
Broken it back the other way.
No, do if this does say phrase ID plus 1.
+1.
I'm not sure that you can.
There's a way to do this. I mean, I could say it like.
It exists.
That's usually why, like, you can do something like this. Oh, actually, no.
But because it can be unknown to 0, if we just did exists, it would be true.
That might actually work. I'm gonna try this real quickly. I think this. Nope, does not. Oh, so it's still doing that. Okay, interesting. So if I phrase ID,
I don't know what that is. But
let's see if this does it one more time. Cool. Yeah, now it's working. So if you undefined, works a little differently than null. So undefined will actually allow me to just check and see if this is a valid thing. And the same +1 will work in this case. So this actually works fine. Yeah. Cool. That was a good point. So the first time I press enter, it's editing, but then it clears the selected ID, and now I can enter more. Yeah. Cool. All right. Time to be 48. What other questions do y'all have? Yes?
Is there anything wrong with clearing out after you submit a button, like just clearing out the phrase as well?
Like up here? Actually, no, that's probably actually the best procedure. So something like on submit, I want to, you're right, I want to clean my work up. I'd say phrase is going to be this. And then also down here, phrase is going to be that too. Now it'll clear out. Yeah. And if I edit this, it'll edit it and it'll still clear out. Yeah, a bird the hand. Cool. Yeah. I definitely recommend just practicing forms, trying to make them more complex. Trying to make them dynamic can be pretty tricky. And like, say you wanted to have like a recipe form where you added different ingredients and there was a dynamic amount of ingredients. That can be pretty hard. I think you all can do it though. I wanted to show you something else that I have at the moment, which is the beauty of inline styling. So I know you all talked about styling and feeling, so I thought this might be a good thing to do. You'll notice I have these cards and they're in a grid. I'm not using Materialize, I'm using pure CSS. Have you all ever seen Display Grid? This stuff? Cool. So you've seen this, okay, cool. Have you all seen this?
Yeah.
Cool, okay.
Maybe not
For those of us who haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can use like Materialize or Semantic, and you can use the column structure, which is great. It works very well. I've gotten to really like the pure CSS display grid. What's cool about this is the way it works is that when you declare, like this div right now is the parent of all these inner divs, which are these phrases, which are here. The way this works is that when you assign display grid to a div, the immediate children of that div will get applied to this grid. So all of the phrases are going to be in the grid. Any children of those will not be, but the immediate children will be. So I can actually say, in this case, something like grid template columns, which is saying basically set up a template. I want to say repeat 3 columns at 1 fraction of the page. And that means that I can actually have these 3 things. If I went ahead and said 10 columns, it's going to make 10 columns. I only have 3 things in here.
Do you
So.
expect to use the arrow
Yeah.
inspector and hover over the div?
Oh yeah, check that out. Yeah, it actually like creates the, yeah, that's cool. But what's also really cool about this is that you can do something like, because this is actually inline, I can give this things like that variables and make it do stuff. Like, I'll keep the grid as is for a second. But actually, let me go to my phrases. So I have a bunch of style in here. If I, for instance, said, I'm going to actually make this a variable. Do math.random times 5. Every phrase is going to randomly generate a different border radius. Does that actually do anything? Maybe it didn't. I'm going to do something else. Let me see.
That might not be the easiest one to show.
No, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do this. Border shadow. And I'll make it a little excessive so you can see.
You can switch those to ticks.
Ticks, thank you. Just testing you guys. You're all great. Doing great. Oh boy. Right? Or background color. You'll notice in inline React CSS styling, you can't do dashes. You have to do the capital letters like breaks. But I could do something like this. Let's say somewhere between 0 and 9. I'm gonna math floor this. So randomly choose a number and round it down. If I said this 3 times, and I put a hashtag in front of it, it'll read it as a hex color if it doesn't go wrong. Commas. Now every single box is a different color every time. And if I change something, oh yeah! So it's pretty cool. You can do really cool stuff with this. You can like dynamically choose to display things. You can even do something like if you had a state value where let's say call it like display and set it to block. You can make your own modals this way. So if I said like, hey, and I set my style in here to say display is equal to this.state.display, and I'll make sure that it's covering the page 100%. Width is 100%, and I'll make the background color blue. And I also want to make it position absolute, so it shows up. This should right now cover the entire, covers everything down here. Okay, yeah, so I have to set the top to 0. Cool, so my entire page is currently covered because of that state value. If I set it to hidden, oh no, none, thank you. Oh no. Wait, that's strange. That should work. Why is it not working? Display none. Oh, where am I? Wow, what am I doing? Where am I putting this? Who's in charge of me? Not my state. Cool. So now it's there. Now it's in the way. I wanted to do something like a real simple on click this dot set state of display to none. Now it starts there and then it goes away on click. So that's like whenever you start using modals, a lot of people use modals in React Mod 5. You can build your own and simply just like you make a div, hide it until you need it, and then you pop it up and cover the page. Yeah. Any questions about that? Or any other things you're curious about with CSS?
Yeah. What's handling your hover right now? Because I saw you had all your styling in line as a div, like in your JXML, but there's nothing setting its hover style.
Upper style.
Hover style.
Oh, hover style. Oh yeah, for the cards.
Yeah.
So the one thing that's you really can't. That's like the one thing you can't do in inline styling is it's.
Right.
You can do it, but it's really, really ugly to get hover to work. So I actually did make just one thing, a hover. All it does is do the transform for the scale. So it zooms in, and it sets the transition for a smooth zoom and background color changes. So
you'll
hover.
You'll do inline and have a CSS file.
Yeah, I kind of think about it like, what I do is I will often do everything in line when I'm building. And if you're ever sewn, it's like putting the pins in almost. Like you're setting up the structure the way you want it, and then once you're done, then you want to extract all that out, and if you can, put it in CSS. It just makes your code a lot cleaner. But if there's something like in this case, I could take almost all of this out except for display. Everything else can be put in a class, and that's fine. But the one that's dynamic, I want to keep. Yeah.
And there's also like style is an object with an object inside of it.
Oh, like this is an object, yeah. So I could actually point to like style sheet and have a variable style sheet that does the same thing. Yeah, and and actually if you ever use React Native, this is the only way to style in React Native. You can't have style sheets, and that you basically build out a const that sets your style in the page, and you just refer to it. Yeah. All right, y'all. Any questions, final questions? All right, that's it.